Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm excited to have Mary Helen Sheriff joining us. Mary has been involved in the group before, so it's great to have you back again, Mary.
Nice to be back. Thank you for having me.
So, Mary is the author of the award-winning Southern women's fiction Boop and Eve's Road Trip. She serves as the CEO of Bookish Road Trip and is a blogger at The Gift of Story. After 14 years teaching elementary school, middle school, college, and professionals, Mary has taken a break from the classroom to focus on writing. She has an MFA from Hollins University and an MA from Old Dominion University and a BA from UVA. She lives in Henrico County, Virginia, with her two children, two cats, and one husband. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm just wondering if you want to start off by telling us about Boop and Eve's road trip.
Sure. So, Boop and Eve's Road Trip is I call it a love story between a grandmother and her granddaughter. The grandmother is Boop, and the granddaughter is Eve. And Eve is a college student. She's a freshman, and she's sort of the victim of a helicopter parent, maybe even a steamroller parent, if we want to go a little bit further. And so she goes off to college and really just doesn't have the coping mechanisms that she needs to deal with life's little problems. And she starts spiraling into a depression. Lucky for her, her grandmother, Boop, lives nearby, and grandma catches wind of this. And basically, when Boop comes and or when Eve comes to Boop and says, "Hey, I need to borrow your car for a road trip," because Eve wants to go look for a friend. Boop says, "Sure, you can borrow my car, but you have to take me along too." Mm-hmm. So she hijacks the road trip so that she can figure out what's going on with her granddaughter. And along the way, they have typical, road trip hijinks. But it turns out that Boop has a pretty dark secret from her past that Eve isn't aware of. And as the story unfolds, Boop has to decide whether or not it's time to let her secret history become known, and whether or not that will help the situation with Eve and her mother, or whether it will make it worse. And it's a dual protagonist story. They're both main characters. They each narrate about half the book. And it's women's fiction. It's set in the southern United States. They start the trip in Florida and they end in Virginia.
Yeah, no, that's a great summary of your book, and have to say I've read it myself and really enjoyed it. It was great to read.
Thank you so much.
Just wondering, do you want to share a little bit from the book?
Sure. I'll share a little bit of the scene. This is pretty early in the book. It's chapter 35, or page 35 rather, not chapter. Page 35. And this is Boop, who's going to be talking, I guess, a couple of characters. Boop's grandma, Eve's the granddaughter, Justine is the mom in between. And the other main character in this scene is Boop's sister, Vicky, who she doesn't get along with. So, there we go. Boop woke with the roosters Monday morning. She couldn't seem to sleep in to save her life, which was a shame since she didn't have all that much to fill her days. After Justine and Eve had taken care of the bulk of the packing, they'd headed back to their respective homes. As she rolled out of bed and put on her pink terry cloth bathrobe, she couldn't help relishing having the condo to herself. Her stomach rumbled. Grits with a side of bacon. The mere thought of them got Boop's engines revved, and she headed to the kitchen to whip some up. Since the instant kind didn't taste right, a good 30 minutes passed before the grits were ready. Boop stirred in a dollop of butter, all the while shaking her head as she remembered Justine informing her yesterday that butter wasn't nutritional. Justine had recommended she switch to "I can't believe it's not butter," but as far as Boop was concerned, the name said it all. The scent of bacon sizzling on the frying pan made her stomach grumble. A cup of coffee rounded out her morning feast. She sat down to dig in. It was gonna be a good day. Then the telephone rang. It was only 7 in the morning. No one rang with good news at that time of day. Boop dodged around towers of boxes to answer the phone. She was worried the call had something to do with Eve. Girl hadn't seemed at all right yesterday. Hello? Betty, how are you? Only one person called her Betty. Boop's good day was shot to hell in a handbasket. In the feather, Vicky, in the feather. Boop's sister fancied herself a lady and insisted that she be addressed as Victoria by her intimates and Mrs. Victoria to the rest of the world. Boop was of the opinion that her sister was too big for her crisp linen breeches and reminded her of this by persistently calling her Vicky. Yes, Vicky said. Boop could practically hear her biting her tongue. Was she a terrible person for wishing she'd draw blood? Vicky continued. I haven't seen you or your sweet granddaughter in a month of Sundays. I'd hoped that Eve might drive you up to Savannah to visit me occasionally. These college kids are busier than mustard trying to catch up. I suppose. However, the semester is ending and my guest bedrooms are aching for some company. Might y'all come for a spell soon? Boop took a deep breath, attempting to inhale calm, but really just inhaling the aroma of her coffee. She massaged the handle of her red coffee cup. I don't reckon so. Thank you kindly. The grits were getting cold, so Boop took a bite, making sure to smack her lips. Listening to her eat was sure to drive Vicky batty, but that was just a bonus. Boop was hungry, or at least that's what she told herself. Now then, what's more important than family? Really, Vicky, Boop felt a headache coming on, so she yanked the plastic rollers from her hair, hoping to relieve the pressure a bit. Only their absence didn't do anything to quell Vicky's nagging voice. Her dulcet tone was like an electric drill grinding in Boop's ear. Really nothing. We aren't getting any younger, Vicky said. Boop glared at her knobby hands with their protruding blue veins, liver spots, and wrinkles. Oh, the wrinkles. Boop sometimes imagined she even smelled of decay. Or maybe it wasn't her imagination. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. Maybe you ain't, but I'm right sprightly. Sprightly like swamp mud. I'm not sure your shoulder would agree. Aw, now. Boop stuck her tongue out at the phone. I need to chat with you and Eve about a few things. Somehow, Vicky made this simple request sound like a royal command. Must be all that time she'd spent married to the senator. She'd aspired to the governor's mansion, but her husband hadn't managed to pull off that feat. Maybe her son, Preston, would. I'm all ears, Boop said. I'd rather speak to you in person. In another time, Vicky might have run for governor herself. No doubt she'd have won and would have been a force to be reckoned with. But she hadn't been raised to have such aspirations. In this case, that might be a blessing for the world. Boop asked, is that necessary? Yes, no reason to sound as though visiting me is like a trip to the dentist. I like my dentist. Betty, seriously, it never goes well with you and me, and now you want to drag Eve into our mess? If you weren't so flippant, and you weren't so stuffy, we should be friends. That ship done left the dock long ago. And I'll go ahead and stop there.
Yeah, no, that was great reading that. Thanks for sharing it.
Thank you.
I'm wondering what the first idea was that came to you for Boop and Eve's road trip.
The idea started like maybe two things. One is Boop is sort of loosely inspired by my own grandmother. And so for a few years after her death, characters like my grandmother or even my grandmother herself kept coming up in stories and essays and things. And so Boop was certainly the first character that I imagined when this idea came. And then the second part of it was that at the time when I started writing this, I was coming out of some postpartum depression. And so part of Eve's struggle was my own attempt to process what I had just gone through. Eve isn't in postpartum depression, but she does struggle with depression. And it felt important for me to write about a character who was struggling with depression, but wasn't the victim of a major trauma. I think often in stories, that's how depression is portrayed, and it can make it hard for people who are struggling with it for no reason, but really they have reasons. But I just kind of wanted to reflect on that and to build a character around someone struggling with more of an everyday depression, which carries its own weight. Like you kind of feel guilty that you feel depressed when you haven't suffered from this awful thing, and that adds to the whole thing.
So did you find that for yourself quite healing in a way?
I did. Yeah, definitely. It kind of gave me something to work for. And I think talking about one's own mental health is difficult. It's not something, I don't know, maybe in Australia y'all are better about it, but we haven't been so good about it in America.
I think it's similar. Okay.
So I did at first find it very difficult to talk about it. Writing about it was maybe a way to communicate some of that without having to publicly speak to it. Since the book came out, I've gotten good at publicly speaking to it.
And what about readers? Have you had readers reach out who might have experienced maybe similar?
Yes. Yeah, definitely had some people reach out to me, some of whom I knew personally, and they were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that you were going through this. I'm so sorry, but also people who were, saying you really expressed very clearly what it felt like, and I knew when I read Eve's character that you must have felt that way sometime too. Like no one who hadn't felt that way could quite capture it like that.
And have you ever been on a road trip like that?
I've definitely been on road trips. My grandmother and I used to plan to go on this giant road trip. And I actually did a little scene in the book that's kind of based on it. We had talked about when I turned 16, we were going to rent an RV and we were going to travel the United States from the East Coast to the West Coast. And that was our big plan. And we didn't, because my grandmother was like 4'10", and I'm not much taller, and I was also 16, and neither of us were capable of driving an RV anywhere. Like my grandmother used to sit on telephone books in order to like see over the steering wheel, kind of short, and so we weren't equipped to drive an RV, but we did take a little road trip together. Here and there, just a couple hours, not like a long-winded one, but so this was kind of my way to take a long road trip with my grandmother, in my imagination anyway.
No, that's great. And could you tell me, had you always wanted to be a writer?
Yes, I've probably been dabbling with writing since like elementary school. I think I was about 23 when I decided to write my first book, and it it didn't get published or anything. This book is the first one to be published, but at that point I was in school to be a teacher, and I did teach for many years and loved that in its own way, but my dream was all of my adult life anyway, to be a writer.
And how hard or easy was it to get this book published?
It was hard. It was a long road. I probably spent 6 years writing it. Finding an agent was difficult. I ended up not getting one. And then I went through a hybrid publishing model instead of traditional publishing, where I basically took on the financial responsibility, but I used a publisher who had traditional ties, so it got traditional distribution, and got to take the journey of a traditional book, but I took on the financial risk.
Okay. And what I'm interested to know what you like to read yourself, and if maybe there's something you might have been reading you can recommend to us.
Sure. I like to read all kinds of things. My reading runs the gamut. So the most recent book that I finished, and I did it as an audio book, and like literally my family said I was weird because I was like laying in my bed for hours just listening to this book, and I was like, no, I'm not weird. If I had a book in my hand, you wouldn't think this was weird. But anyway, it's called Girls with Sharp Sticks, and it's a young adult novel. And it's a bunch of girls who are at a private school, kind of dystopian seeming, where these girls are sort of raised to be kind of Stepford wifey.
Oh, okay,
and then there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes that's slowly revealed, and I won't do any spoilers for you, but it's a series, so I haven't read any more of them, but I'm kind of excited to.
Sounds interesting. I'll have to check it out.
And right now I'm almost halfway through A Feigned Madness, by Tonya Mitchell, which is the story of Nellie Bly, who is a real person, but this is her fictional story. But what Nellie did was, it was the late 1800s. She was a journalist, and she pretended to be insane so that she could get put into this insane asylum and find out what it was like, and kind of break the story open about how these women were being treated in this place. And so this is that story of like what it's like with her in a madhouse.
Yeah. Well, thanks for those recommendations. Both sound like good ones to add to our lists. Could you tell us how much research you had to do for Boops and Eve's road trip?
Yeah, definitely some research. So I ended up traveling a little bit. I went to St. Augustine, which is one of the places in the book. And I actually wrote the scene prior to going and did research online. And then we happened to be going on a cruise that left out of Miami. And I was like, we could stop in St. Augustine and I could see it in real life. And, so we did that. The place they stop in the book is called the Fountain of Youth. And it's, so I wanted to see what it was like in real person versus just, perusing the website. And then, after seeing it, I did change some things and add some things, but largely, like, if I had lifted the way it was, it wasn't gonna, it was an accurate representation. And then I also made a trip to Savannah because I had not ever been there. And I did that before I wrote the scene. So that was good. And I went to a place in Virginia that is like a home. Well, it used to be, it doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be a home owned by the government where they would put people who had handicaps.
Okay, yeah.
And there's a subplot in the book, which I won't go into because it is a bit of a spoiler, but I went to a real place that's like a place in the book.
Yeah.
And they had a museum set up so you could see things there.
That's
Yeah, that was neat.
Yeah,
and,
so you must have found some interesting things out when you were doing your research.
Absolutely. And then Eve wants to be a fashion designer. That's her thing. And I am not a fashion designer, and I'm not even a good dresser. So this is like, a big leap for me. But I decided to go there because at the time my daughter was 4 when I started writing this, and she wanted to be a fashion designer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And she had this idea that she would draw clothes and I would make them for her.
Oh, okay.
I didn't even know how to turn on a sewing machine. So I decided this was a way to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And I would take some sewing classes and learn about fashion design and be able to try to make some of these things my daughter had designed. I took a few classes. I was nowhere close to being able to take her pictures and turn them into clothes. So that idea didn't quite make it. But I did learn about some things about fashion design, and we watched Project Runway together, which was fun.
Yeah. Sounds like fun. Just want to say we've got a few people watching, so if you do have any questions for Mary, please type them in comments and I can read them out. I'm wondering, for you, what do you think being a successful writer means?
That's a big question. So I mean, my dream of success would be like New York Times bestseller lists. That's the hardcore or whatever. But there's also other ways to be successful. Touching people, connecting with people. Having people reach out and tell me that they looked at their relationship with their family members differently after reading the book, and that made them feel more accepting and understanding of where they might be coming from. That's pretty powerful. So, depending on how you want to measure success, I think there are different ways to do it.
Yeah. And you're quite involved with the Bookish road trip?
Yes.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. We started as a Facebook group, and it's for people who like books and like to travel, which I think has a similar audience to you all. And we do lots of different things, but largely talk about books and travel. And we have a book club, and we have author interviews, a lot of similar things to what you do here. Right now we're running an auction for a charity. The charity is called Libraries for Kids, and it raises money to get books to rural Kenya. There's schools out there that have very little to no supplies. and we are partnering with a nonprofit to raise some money. So that's kind of fun. And the auction ends on Monday night. So our goal is to raise about $5,000. And we have a newsletter and an Instagram platform and, lots of different things like that.
Yeah. Well, and could you tell us if you have any writing rituals?
Any writing rituals?
Yeah.
I don't really. I feel like I'm not a big person of habit. In fact, I should probably work on having more habits. But I tend to, recently I've tried to take 3 mornings a week and just block them for writing as my way of trying to manage my time a little better. But next month, if you ask me the same question, I might be trying to do something different. So
Yeah.
I won't claim that's my answer.
And do you have a favorite place to write?
It depends. So if I'm in my house, I like to go sit in the recliner and turn the fireplace on. I recently joined a co-working office space to try to get out of my house some.
Okay.
And I find that a good place to go if I want to be somewhere different. Before COVID, I used to do coffee shops and libraries some, and I haven't gotten back to that yet. Maybe I could, but I haven't. So yeah.
And I'm wondering, are you writing something new at the moment?
I am. I'm working on a book that's pretty unlike the one I just published. And it's a young adult dystopian novel set in the future, 30, 40 years from now, where a pandemic has raged and not been quelled.
Okay.
And this girl lives in a society that is entirely virtual.
Oh,
and it's kind of dystopian, and she meets a boy who's chosen to live a different lifestyle. And he belongs to a religious cult that believes that the plague was sent by God to rid the world of sinners, and there's no reason to hide in your house because, if you're good, then God won't kill you. And they fall in love. So it's a love story between these two different worldviews.
Sounds interesting. And how far along are you with that?
I'm about 2 drafts in, but it's still kind of a mess.
Yeah.
So I think there'll be quite a few more drafts coming.
Yeah. And can you tell us, do you have a favorite snack or drink while you're writing?
Favorite snack? Well, popcorn is my all-time favorite snack. And I usually write in the morning, so it's usually coffee that I'm drinking. But I prefer wine, but I don't usually drink that in the morning.
And Judy says she can't wait to read your new book. It sounds wonderful.
Oh, thanks, Judy.
And I'm wondering, if you could be one of your characters for a day, who would you choose to be and why?
For a day, I would probably be Boop. Eve's a little dark. I don't need to spend that. I don't need to spend the day there. Allie's pregnant. I'm not a huge fan of being pregnant. Yeah. Justine's a bit much. So Boop is the most fun. I'll go with her.
Yeah. Okay. And do you share, while you're writing, do you share your work with anybody?
I have off and on. This particular book I shared, I actually wrote it first as a screenplay.
Okay.
It's almost like a dialogue outline, I guess. So I did share that with 2 friends, one who's an actress and one who writes screenplays, because of the format. And I got some feedback before I wrote my first draft. And then no one's really seen it since then. We'll see. Yeah. I need it to not be quite this bad before I show it to anyone.
Yeah. And do you ever get writer's block? And if you do, what do you usually do? I
don't know that I get blocked so much in the sense that I think most people say when they mean that. And I guess I have outlines, like I know what's going to happen. There are definitely days when I don't feel like doing it.
Yeah.
And so like my energy is blocked or, that kind of thing. But I don't ever sit there and go, I have no idea what to write because it's already planned.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you started Boop and Eve's road trip, does that mean you already knew the ending before you started?
I knew what the ending was going to be, but then it changes yes. So I have outlines, but those change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I did know I wanted to end happy though. Like that was important to me especially if I was gonna dabble in mental health, that I wanted the book to be hopeful. And while there are dark moments, part of the reason Boop became a dual protagonist was because she adds a sense of hope and levity even when Eve is dark and whiny.
Yeah. Yeah. And what advice would you give to a new writer?
I think my biggest advice would be to make friends with other people who are writing in various places along the journey. Their support and knowledge and friendship will just make this so much better. Writing is a solitary action, but I think success in it is not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks so much for talking to us. Been great chatting to you. Just wondering before you go, do you want to let people know how they can keep up to date with what you're doing?
Sure. I have a website. It's maryhelensheriff.com, and Sheriff has one R and two F's. And I have a newsletter that you can sign up for there. And I send one out, well, theoretically once a month, but let me tell you, it is not that much. So, yeah, we'll say every other month. And that would be a great place. And then, as you mentioned, Book a Short Trip, I'm there a lot. And those are probably two best places to keep up.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, and thanks for joining us. Been great to chat to you, and looking out for your new book.
Thank you so much,
Thanks.
Jackie.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.